The sun was shining high in the sky, and the meadow was buzzing with life. Flowers swayed in the gentle breeze, and butterflies danced in the air. Near a big oak tree, a little ant was hard at work. Ant was small, but oh, was she determined. She carried seeds, one by one, back to her home, stacking them neatly for the winter. Just as Ant was about to head back for another load, a shadow passed over her. She looked up and saw Grasshopper lounging on a leaf, strumming his tiny violin made from a twig and a blade of grass. Grasshopper loved to play music all day long and never seemed to work. "Hey, Ant!" Grasshopper called out with a wide grin. "Why are you working so hard? Look at this beautiful day. The sun is shining. The flowers are blooming. You should relax. Come join me and listen to my new song." Ant wiped the sweat from her brow and shook her head. "I can't, Grasshopper. Winter is coming and I need to gather food. If I don't work now, I won't have enough to eat when the snow falls." Grasshopper laughed and waved his hand dismissively. "Winter is so far away. There's plenty of time for that later. You should learn to enjoy life. Who needs to worry about food when the meadow is full of delicious things to eat?" Ant smiled politely. It's true. The meadow is full of food now, but that won't last forever. Once the cold comes, there won't be any more seeds or berries. You really should start gathering food, too. Grasshopper rolled over on his leaf, closing his eyes. "Nah, I'll be fine. You ants are always worrying about tomorrow. I live for today. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a song to finish." Ant shrugged and went back to work, carrying another seed across the meadow. All day long, Ant worked hard, while Grasshopper played his violin, danced around, and enjoyed the sunshine. Days turned into weeks, and the meadow began to change. The bright green leaves turned yellow, then orange, and finally, they started falling from the trees. The air became cooler, and the once busy meadow was growing quieter. But Ant kept working, storing more food in her underground home, preparing for the cold. One chilly morning, Grasshopper noticed that the flowers were gone, and the warm breeze had turned into a cold wind. He looked around and realized that most of the meadow creatures had disappeared. The bees, butterflies, and even the birds had all left. Grasshopper shivered and scratched his head. Maybe I should have started gathering food like Ant said. But he quickly shook the thought away. No, there's still time. But as the days passed, the weather grew colder. The grass turned brown, and soon, the first snowflakes began to fall. Grasshopper's belly rumbled. He searched the meadow for something to eat, but there was nothing left. No seeds, no berries, not even a crumb of bread. Grasshopper's legs trembled as he stumbled through the snow. "Oh no, what am I going to do?" he muttered to himself, his stomach growling louder than ever. "I should have listened to Ant." Desperate and cold, Grasshopper wandered through the snowy meadow until he saw a tiny entrance to an underground tunnel. It was Ant's home. He knocked on the door, hoping Ant would answer. The door creaked open, and there stood Ant, warm and cozy in her little home, surrounded by piles of food. Her cheeks were rosy, and her home was filled with the smell of baked acorn bread. "Grasshopper, what are you doing out in the snow?" Ant asked, surprised. Grasshopper, shivering from the cold, looked down at his feet. "Well, Ant, I didn't gather any food for winter. I thought I had plenty of time, but now I'm hungry and I don't know what to do. Can you help me?" Ant thought for a moment, tapping her tiny foot. "You didn't gather any food at all?" Grasshopper shook his head, feeling embarrassed. "No, I spent all my time playing music and dancing. I guess I wasn't very smart." Ant sighed but smiled kindly. "Well, Grasshopper, I did warn you that winter was coming, but I can't let you starve. Come inside. There's plenty of food here. You can stay with me for the winter." Grasshopper's eyes lit up with gratitude. "Really? "Oh, thank you, Ant. You're the best." He hopped inside, warming his frozen legs by the fire. As they sat together, Ant handed Grasshopper a steaming bowl of warm soup. "But next year you need to work hard and gather food too. You can't just play all day and expect someone else to take care of you." Grasshopper nodded eagerly, slurping down the soup. "I promise, Ant. Next year I'll work just as hard as you. I'll even help you gather seeds, and maybe we can take a break together and play music sometimes." Ant smiled. "That sounds like a good plan, Grasshopper. There's a time for work and a time for play. You just have to find the right balance." From that day on, Grasshopper and Ant became the best of friends. When spring returned, Grasshopper kept his promise. He worked side by side with Ant, gathering food for the next winter. But he also taught Ant how to play the violin, and they would take breaks to sing and dance together in the meadow. And when winter came again, they were both prepared. Grasshopper wasn't hungry or cold, and he had learned a valuable lesson. While it's fun to play, it's also important to work hard and plan for the future. After all, a little work today can make tomorrow much brighter. And so, the brave little ant and the once lazy grasshopper lived happily ever after, balancing their work and play, and enjoying every season that came their way.